welcome Dr. Ann Billmeyer. It took all of us a lot of imagination to get through that pandemic, right? We had to just keep going. It will end one day, right? Well, I have some remarks I've prepared, and they're really for all of you, but they're especially for the graduating class. And I wrote them with all of you in mind and all of you there in the Zoom rooms because of the remarkable accomplishment that you've demonstrated. So I'm going to just jump in. I want to say to you graduating class, you imagined yourself here today, and that is why you are here. Imagination was the seed that grew into a decision that led to taking action, that brought you to this room on this day at this time to celebrate together the incredible accomplishment of completing your graduate degrees. This did not happen by accident, and no one else could have made this happen. You did it. And it began inside yourself when you imagined a different life for yourself. You imagined that you could make a change. You imagined that you did not have to remain as you were and where you were, how you were. You imagined something else was possible. This is the incredible transformative power of the imagination, this innate gift of our humanness. Every child is born with it. And we can hear some of those imaginative children in the room today. We all have this power to imagine what is not yet and maybe what has never been. Imagination also gives us the gift of empathy. We can imagine into the experience of another human being. We may never have experienced what they experienced, but when they share their story, and we listen, and I mean really listen, and we enter it. We enter it with the power of our imaginations. And through this power, we get to feel with another human being. And we get to share in their unique experience. Imagination gives us this ability to transcend borders and boundaries. It helps us transcend differences that have been constructed to keep us small, because imagination is big. It makes us larger, more courageous, more connected. I mean, graduates, just look around at each other. Take in the courage of these people you're sitting with, to take on a pathway of change, to do it from their own desire and longing. And notice also how you can feel connected with them. Some you've had class with, some you may not have, but yet you are all here. And that capacity to feel connected, that's part of our imaginative gifts. When you imagined what you could become, you opened a door inside yourself and you said, I want to be something more. I want to widen the scope of my understanding. I want to deepen my knowing. I want to be something more than what I am. And you are becoming this through this choice. And here together today, we are bearing witness to what is possible when we allow ourselves to imagine into the future. Because through that collective act of imagining, and as Robert mentioned, the founders of the school back in the 1970s, imagining such a school could exist, we actually are living in the future others imagined. And we are now creating a future for those who will come after us. And really, it's kind of like this little pinon seed. Can you see that little tiny thing? I collected off the forest floor this morning. Just like a pinon, a single pine seed that holds within it all the power and potential, the possibility of becoming exactly what it is meant to be. And if conditions are right, this little seed will flourish. It'll grow roots, it'll sprout, it'll grow branches. It will become one of the magnificent pinon trees in the forest surrounding Santa Fe. and it will be part of this abundant natural world that we ourselves belong to. Somehow, in the mystery of creation, you may know that right there in the sort of mid back of your brain is a very small pine seed. It's even smaller than this pinon. And we don't know exactly where the imagination resides, but every human being has a pineal gland. It is shaped like a pine cone, hence its name, pineal. The pineal gland has long been associated with the third eye because it is light sensitive and it does regulate our circadian rhythms. We respond to daylight and night, light and darkness, and the pineal gland is a part of that and has long been called the third eye. Perhaps this third eye is what sees and helps us imagine what does not yet exist in form. Maybe it's the inner eye that watches, recording our dreams, an eye that glimpses the future, knowing what is coming before we do, and we call that intuition or gut instinct or inner knowing. This pineal gland gives us a power of inner seeing and image making and imagining. Psychologist Valida Tukola says, to imagine is to see beyond the limits of what reality imposes. It is to move outside of the container of our world and play with possibilities of what could be. Imagination gives us the power to mend, repair, soothe, hold, and contains our internal experience, including changing our internal experiences into something we can live with, something that we can move beyond. And this power allows us to rehearse new external realities that we might experience. What's unique about this ability is it does not depend on what actually exists. It's unlike perception. Perception is dependent on what is external to us, but rather this is generated from within. So if we're suffering or hurting, but we can imagine feeling better, we might strive to feel better. And if we didn't believe that things could improve, would we try? Indigenous psychotherapist Eduardo Duran defines our suffering as a soul wound. He says this soul wound is based on the intergenerational trauma, which he links to colonial processes of violence and domination. Duran writes, "It is important to note that decolonizing does not only apply to Native people or other people of color who have been colonized. So-called mainstream Westerners also may want to decolonize from the collective consumer colonization process that has been imposed on them and that has caused so much suffering." And I'd add to that we have suffered from a deep rupture. No matter where we are from on this beautiful planet, our ancestors experienced deep connection with place and with the earth. But through modernity, we have suffered all kinds of systems of separation and domination. And this dehumanization, which places some as superior to others, privileging some at the expense of others, this dehumanization has hurt us all. So how do we begin to heal this soul wound? What does this require of our capacity to imagine? If we want to heal, we look to that word. To heal literally means to make whole. So if healing is what happens when we have been restored to wholeness, how do we begin to envision the possibility and imagine the experience of this wholeness? For when we are anxious or depressed, raging, frustrated, impatient, heartsick, in these times, the wounded soul is crying out to be whole. And our soul, invisible but intimate as breath, so close. Let's just take a breath, everyone. And exhale. That was pretty good, but everybody wasn't breathing. So let's one more time. Let's take a deep in breath. That breath is holy. The words soul and spirit are often used interchangeably, and the word spirit is directly related to the words inspire, inspiration, respiration, and that tells us breath, soul or spirit, and the spark of creative inspiration are all related. So what creative inspiration does the soul require to heal? Poet Patty Ann Rogers asks this in her poem on the existence of the soul. She writes, "And if not for its sake, for the sake of my soul, why would I go out into the night alone and stare deliberately straight up into 15 billion years ago?" What have you done to feed your soul lately? When was the last time you went out and stared up into the spinning Milky Way galaxy? Or maybe you feed your soul by making music, dancing, painting, collaging, making a delicious meal, writing poetry, staring into your best friend's eyes. What are the things that you need to do to feed your soul? And what is your soul's most intimate and creative language? The word creativity is related to an old word for the Roman goddess of grain, Ceres. She was the guardian of the seed, fertility, caring, nurturing, and the very root of the word creative means to grow. So, what are you growing? With your thoughts, with your actions, with your vision for the world, what are you growing, graduates of 2024? We know in the cycles of growth that there are seasons, outer seasons and inner seasons, seasons of fruitfulness and stillness, celebration and loss, birth and death, growth and decay, expansion and contraction, wellness and illness. And we know creativity is born from all of these human experiences. And from that perspective, it's neither good nor bad. One is not good and the other bad. These things, this just is. And we get to experience this isness. So how do we become large enough to live in the present moment of is, big enough to really experience all human experience as creative and as the basis for healing? We do this through our imaginations. In the poem Ancestral Meaning by poet Hari Alluri, he writes, "I am desperate for a language to hold me." And aren't we desperate for the language that truly holds us? And perhaps this is the language of imagination, of creativity, and of healing. Your language shapes who you are, and it shapes the kind of healer you are becoming because it will shape how you listen. But because you have imagined yourselves here today, I know you will continue to imagine and reimagine. I know you will continue to grow and change. You will continue to heal and be healed. Imagination is the seed, just like that pinon I gathered from the forest floor. And I have in this little bag for each one of you, and those of you on Zoom, we're going to mail them, one little pinon from the forest in a little bag with a little line. So you'll pick those as you come across. But I picked these from the forest, from our forest here in northern New Mexico. And it's because I also see all of you as members of a forest, trees in that forest of consciousness, in that forest of healers, in that forest of creatives, in that forest of imaginative human beings. And so may this gift of the pinon remind you when you forget, and you will forget, because we are creatures made from stories, and some days we remember and some days we forget. But may this pinon remind you that your imagination brings possibility, potentiality, the power to once again transform yourself and help heal the hurt in the world. Thank you.